soldering iron hissed as a bead of molten lead hit the circuit board, but the sound was drowned out by the thunderous pounding on the reinforced steel door of the basement. Zora didn't move. She kept her eyes fixed on the flickering holographic display of her terminal. "Stay in the back, Kai," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. The door didn't just open, it groaned as the hydraulic locks were forced from the outside. A man stumbled in, his presence instantly sucking the air out of the cramped, ozone-heavy room. It was Dante Shin. The man whose face loomed over every skyscraper in Neo-Seoul was now bleeding onto Zora's cracked linoleum floor. His charcoal suit jacket was shredded, and he clutched a glowing neural drive like it was a dying heart. "They said you were the only one who wouldn't ask questions," Dante rasped. His eyes, usually sharp enough to cut glass, were clouded with a milky white film. The digital static was taking him. Zora's palms sweated against the handle of her iron. "I don't do charity for billionaires, Mr. Shin, especially not the one who signed my blacklisting papers 5 years ago." Dante collapsed against her workbench, sending a pile of spare processors scattering. He didn't recoil from the mess. He was shaking, his skin pale and slick with cold sweat. "The Aura AI, it's cascading. If it dies, my mind goes with it. Perform the forbidden upload, now." Before Zora could refuse, a small shadow moved in the corner of the room. Kai walked out, clutching a battered toy robot. The boy didn't look afraid. He looked curious. He walked straight up to the man who could have him erased from existence with a single phone call. "Mommy," Kai said, pointing a small finger at the bleeding CEO. "That's the nice man from the playground, the one who gave me the silver microchip." Zora's heart skipped a beat as she stared at the silver chip tucked into her son's toy. It wasn't just a chip, it was the source key she had hidden 5 years ago. Dante looked at the boy, then at Zora, his breath hitching. He reached out a trembling hand, but then stopped, his jaw tightening in agony as the static flared. "Zora," he whispered, the milky white in his eyes beginning to glow with an eerie blue light. "Upload it, or we all die today." Zora looked at the door, then at her son, then at the man dying on her floor. She grabbed the neural drive from his hand. Her fingers brushed his, and for a split second, the blue glow in his eyes stabilized. He didn't pull away. The Untouchable CEO was actually leaning into her touch. She slammed the drive into the terminal and hit the execute command. A warning flashed in blood-red text. "Warning, neural tether initiated. Disconnect will result in synaptic failure." She didn't hesitate. She hit enter. The room was engulfed in a blinding white light as the upload began, weaving their minds together into a single, dangerous thread. As the light faded, Zora heard the heavy boots of a tactical team hitting the pavement outside. Dante's eyes snapped open, the blue glow gone, replaced by a terrifyingly clear focus. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. "The upload is finished," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "But Zora, if you move more than 10 feet away from me, my heart will stop beating." The air in the Shin-Tech executive elevator didn't smell like the ozone and stagnant rain of the slums. It smelled of expensive sandalwood and filtered oxygen. Zora stood in the corner of the glass box, her fingers digging into the straps of Kai's backpack. Beside her, Dante Shin stood like a statue carved from obsidian. His breathing was shallow, his eyes fixed on the rising floor numbers, but he was leaning, almost imperceptibly, toward her. The neural tether hummed at the base of Zora's skull, a faint rhythmic vibration that pulsed in time with Dante's heartbeat. It was a terrifying intimacy. She could feel his lingering pain, a dull throb of digital static that only eased when she stood within his shadow. "You can't keep me here, Dante," Zora whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the lift. "I have a life. I have people who will look for me." Dante didn't turn his head. His jaw was set so tight it looked like it might snap. "You have a blacklist record and a trail of debt, Zora. The only people looking for you are the tactical teams my father sent to your basement. If you step outside this building, the tether snaps. I die, and you become a fugitive for the murder of a CEO. Is that the life you want for Kai?" Zora looked down at her son. Kai was staring at his own reflection in the polished chrome of the elevator door, seemingly oblivious to the fact that his mother was now a high-tech prisoner. The elevator chimed, and the doors slid open to reveal the penthouse level, a sprawling expanse of white marble and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the neon-drenched grid of Neo-Seoul. "This is your janitor's closet," Dante said, gesturing to a hidden door behind a massive holographic waterfall. "Stay inside. Do not access the external network. If you need anything, the Aura AI will provide it. But do not, under any circumstances, let Isabella see you. Isabella, Zora began, but the name was cut short by the sound of clicking heels on marble. Dante's posture shifted instantly. He moved away from Zora, his face becoming a mask of cold, corporate indifference. He stepped out of the elevator just as a woman in a sharp, blood-red power suit rounded the corner. This was Isabella, the vice president of Shin-Tech, and the woman rumored to be Dante's future bride. Her eyes were like shards of ice, scanning Dante with a predatory concern. "Dante, you've been off the grid for 6 hours," Isabella said, her voice a melodic purr that didn't match the coldness in her gaze. "The board is in a frenzy. There are rumors of an attack on your motorcade, and you look disheveled." She reached out to straighten his tie, and Zora, watching from the shadows of the elevator, felt a sudden, sharp spike of heat in her own chest. It wasn't jealousy, it was the tether. As Dante moved further from Zora to meet Isabella, the connection stretched. A low-frequency whine filled Zora's ears, and she felt a sudden, crushing weight on her lungs. Dante winced, his hand flying to his chest as he subtly adjusted his stance to stay within the 10-foot limit of the elevator door. "I had a system glitch, Isabella. Nothing more," Dante rasped, his voice strained. Isabella's eyes narrowed. She didn't look at Dante. She looked past him, toward the elevator. "And since when do you take the freight elevator, darling? And why is the air in here suddenly smelling of cheap solder and slum rot?" Zora held her breath, pressing herself into the corner of the lift. Kai started to move, his toy robot clinking against the metal floor. Zora snatched his hand, her heart hammering against her ribs so loudly she was sure Isabella could hear it. "The main lift is under maintenance," Dante lied smoothly, though a bead of sweat was rolling down his temple. "Go to the boardroom. I'll join you in 5 minutes." "I don't think so," Isabella whispered, stepping closer to him, forcing him to back up, straight toward the elevator where Zora was hiding. "You're hiding something, Dante. You've been different since the Aura project went into cascade. You're holding onto a secret, and I intend to find out if that secret has a heartbeat." She lunged forward, pushing past Dante's arm to swipe her hand across the elevator's light sensor. The doors, which had begun to close, hissed open again. Zora froze, her eyes locking with Isabella's. The silence in the penthouse became deafening, broken only by the sound of Kai's toy robot activating in the silence. "Well, well," Isabella said, a slow, cruel smile spreading across her face as she looked Zora up and down. "It seems the Ghost King has brought home a stray." Isabella reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, high-frequency scanner, pointing it directly at Zora's chest. The device let out a piercing, rhythmic chirp. Isabella's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. "That signal? That's not a heartbeat," Isabella hissed, her eyes darting between Zora and Dante. "You've done it, haven't you? You've performed the forbidden upload. You've tied the company's entire future to this nobody." Isabella raised the scanner like a weapon, her thumb hovering over a red broadcast button. "I wonder how the board will feel when they find out their god is on a leash held by a basement rat." The penthouse felt like it had been plunged into a deep freeze. Isabella's thumb remained poised over the broadcast button, her face a mask of triumphant malice. She wasn't just looking at a woman, she was looking at a leverage point that could topple a trillion-dollar throne. Zora felt the neural tether vibrate violently, a physical manifestation of Dante's soaring blood pressure. The air in the room seemed to hum with the shared frequency of their panic. "Isabella, put the scanner down," Dante commanded. His voice was steady, but Zora could feel the tremors in his nervous system through the link. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. If that signal is interrupted by a public frequency, the feedback loop could be fatal." "Fatal for you, perhaps?" Isabella countered, her eyes gleaming with cold ambition. "But for me, it's a vacancy. The board has been looking for a reason to replace the Ghost King with someone more stable, someone who doesn't have a basement rat as a pacemaker." Kai shifted beside Zora, his small hand gripping her denim apron. "Mommy, the pretty lady is being mean. Is she part of the glitch?" The boy's innocent voice sliced through the tension, causing Isabella's gaze to drop to the child. Her eyes widened as they landed on the toy robot in Kai's hand, specifically the silver microchip glowing faintly through the plastic casing. "The source key," Isabella whispered, her voice trembling with a new kind of greed. "You didn't just bring the coder, you brought the catalyst." Before Isabella could press the button, The penthouse's lights flickered and died. A deep, resonant chime echoed through the marble halls. Aura critical failure. Sensory overload detected. The AI's voice boomed from the ceiling. Dante let out a choked gasp and collapsed to one knee. The tether flared white-hot, sending a jolt of pure agony through Zora's skull. It felt like her brain was being scrubbed with wire wool. She realized instantly what was happening. The AI was reacting to Dante's extreme emotional distress, and it was drawing power from Zora to stabilize him. "Dante!" Zora ignored the danger and lunged forward, catching him before his head hit the marble. The moment her skin touched the back of his neck, the agonizing whine in her ears vanished. The blue glow in Dante's eyes, which had begun to flicker erratically, smoothed into a steady, pulsing light. To Isabella, it looked like a romantic embrace, but to Zora, it was a manual data transfer. She was grounding him, acting as a heat sink for the digital fire burning through his synapses. Dante's breathing leveled out. He looked up, his face inches from Zora's. For a heartbeat, the corporate titan was gone, replaced by a man who looked terrified and profoundly lonely. He leaned into her touch, his forehead resting against hers. "Don't let go," he whispered, so low Isabella couldn't hear. "If you let go, the static takes everything," Isabella sneered, recovering her composure as the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. "How touching, a parasite and its host. I'm going to enjoy watching you both be dismantled." She turned to walk toward the executive terminal, her thumb finally pressing the broadcast button. But instead of the Shin-Tech logo appearing on the screens, a video began to play. It was a grainy, high-angle shot of a corporate laboratory from 5 years ago. It showed Isabella and an older man, Dante's father, Hiroshi, discussing the backdoor access to the Aura AI. Isabella froze. "What is this? Stop this. You forgot one thing, Isabella," Zora said, her voice growing stronger as she felt the AI's power flowing through her. "I built Aura. I am the only one she truly listens to. You tried to scan my signal, but you ended up giving me access to your personal cloud. Every secret you've ever kept is now sitting in my temporary drive." Isabella's face drained of color. She looked at the terminal, then at the guards who were now entering the room, confused by the sirens. "Delete it, now. The broadcast you just sent." Zora tilted her head, a cold smile touching her lips. "It wasn't to the board, it was to me. But if you don't drop that scanner and walk away, the next broadcast goes to the Federal Bureau of Technology," Isabella snarled, dropping the scanner as if it had turned into a viper. She looked at Dante, then at Zora, her eyes promising a slow and painful vengeance. "This isn't over. You're a dead woman walking, Zora Vance. And Dante, you're just a ghost in a suit." She stormed out, the guards following her in a confused huddle. As the doors hissed shut, Dante slumped against Zora, his full weight pressing her into the marble. The red emergency lights cast long, jagged shadows across the room. "You saved me," Dante rasped, his eyes searching hers. "I saved my son's future," Zora corrected, though she didn't pull away. Suddenly, Kai's toy robot let out a sharp, metallic chirp. The silver chip began to glow bright red, and a map of the city's underground tunnels projected onto the ceiling. "Mommy!" Kai said, his voice small and frightened. "The toy says Grandpa is coming, and he's bringing the red dragons." Zora looked at Dante, her blood turning to ice. The red dragons were the syndicate's elite cleaners. Hiroshi wasn't waiting for the board to act. He was coming to purge the system manually. The red glow on the ceiling wasn't just a map. It was a death warrant. Dante scrambled to his feet, pulling Zora up with him. The neural tether lashed at her mind, a sharp, stinging reminder that his adrenaline was spiking. "We can't take the elevators," Dante said, his voice tight with a newfound urgency. "My father owns the building's OS. If the red dragons are mobilized, he's already locked down the perimeter. We're in a glass box, Zora, and the snipers are already ranging the windows. Then we go through the spine," Zora said, pointing to the massive central column of the penthouse. "The cooling vents for the main servers. They're shielded against thermal imaging because of the heat they generate. Aura, open the maintenance bypass." The floor hissed, and a section of the marble slid back, to reveal a ladder descending into a pit of humming, blue light and swirling white mist. Dante didn't hesitate. He scooped up Kai, holding the boy tightly against his chest, and began the climb down. Zora followed, the heat from the servers hitting her face like a physical blow. As the marble slab slid shut above them, the sound of the penthouse windows shattering echoed through the shaft. The dragons had arrived. 10 minutes later, they emerged into the digital underbelly, the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the city's glittering surface. This was a world of rusted pipes, dripping condensation, and thick bundles of fiber optic cables that glowed like neon veins. The smell was a mix of salt water and burnt silicon. "We need to move," Dante said, setting Kai down. He checked a small holographic display on his wrist. "My father is tracking the tether's frequency. It's like a beacon in the dark. We need to mask it. There's a high society charity gala tonight at the Museum of Antiquities," Zora said, her mind racing through the city's social calendar. "It's a blackout event, no personal devices, no neural links, and the entire building is wrapped in a Faraday cage to prevent industrial espionage. If we can get inside, the signal will be trapped within the walls. We'll be invisible to the red dragons." Dante looked at her, his eyes scanning her distressed denim apron and grease-stained shirt. "We look like we just crawled out of a sewer, Zora. We won't even get past the sidewalk, let alone the security detail." "I'm a designer of code, Dante. I know how to design a facade," Zora countered. They moved through the tunnels until they reached a hidden storage locker Dante kept for emergencies. Inside were the spoils of a billionaire's paranoia: high-end formal wear, liquid metal fabrics, and skin graft masks. An hour later, the Ghost King and the basement rat were gone. In their place stood a power couple that demanded the room's attention. Dante wore a suit of midnight blue silk that seemed to absorb the light around it. But it was Zora who was unrecognizable. She wore a gown made of smart silk, a shimmering, iridescent fabric that shifted from deep violet to silver as she moved. Her hair was a crown of braided gold wire that acted as a hidden antenna, stabilizing the tether. "You look..." Dante paused, his usual cold composure failing him as he looked at her. "You look like you own the city." "Tonight I have to," Zora replied, checking the small earpiece she had fitted for Kai, who was hidden in a safe room crate with a portable gaming rig. "Stay close. If we drift apart during the gala, the Faraday cage will cause the tether to feedback. It will be like a grenade going off in our heads." They entered the museum through the VIP entrance, the heavy lead-lined doors closing behind them with a final, echoing thud. The silence was immediate. The static in Dante's head vanished instantly as the Faraday cage cut off the city's digital noise. He let out a long, shuddering breath, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in years. The gala was a sea of masks, silk, and whispered conspiracies. As they moved through the crowd, Zora felt the eyes of the elite on them. She kept her hand tucked into the crook of Dante's arm, her skin burning where it touched the silk of his jacket. They were a perfectly calibrated lie. Suddenly, a voice cut through the soft orchestral music. "Mr. Shin, I didn't think you'd have the courage to show your face after the rumors of your instability." Dante stiffened. It was Xavier, a rival CEO who had been trying to hostile take over Shin-Tech for months. He was holding a glass of champagne, his eyes scanning Zora with a predatory curiosity. "And who is this exquisite creature? She doesn't look like the usual corporate drones you surround yourself with." "This is my consultant," Dante said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register. "She's the reason your stock is going to plummet by morning." Xavier laughed, but his eyes stayed on Zora. He leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive gin. "Consultant? She looks more like a distraction. Tell me, the consultant, do you know what happens to people who stand too close to the Ghost King? They tend to disappear." He reached out to touch Zora's shoulder, but Dante moved with a speed that shocked the room. He caught Xavier's wrist mid-air, his grip so tight the glass of champagne shattered, spilling gold liquid across the floor. "Don't touch her," Dante hissed. The room went silent. The blackout gala had just become a battlefield. Zora felt the tether pulse with a sudden, violent energy. Dante wasn't protecting his secret anymore. He was protecting her. But as she looked past Xavier, she saw a man in a red mask standing by the buffet. He wasn't looking at the art. He was looking at the gold wire in Zora's hair. The red dragons weren't tracking the signal. They were tracking the museum's central exhibit, the Eye of Heaven, a massive uncut diamond kept behind a sonic mesh field. To the guests, they looked like a couple admiring art. In reality, Zora was tapping into the gold wire in her hair, using it as a short-range transmitter. She couldn't reach the outside world, but she could reach the museum's local server. "What are you doing?" Dante asked, stepping closer to shield her movements from the red-masked watcher. "Isabella and your father think they've won because they have my old police file," Zora said, her fingers dancing in the air, manipulating a holographic interface only she could see through her contact lenses. "But the red dragons operate on a burn protocol. They don't just kill, they erase. I'm giving them something else to erase." With a final flick of her wrist, Zora bypassed the museum's security. Suddenly, every holographic display in the gala flickered. The peaceful images of ancient history vanished, replaced by a scrolling list of offshore bank accounts and encrypted communication logs. "Is that Isabella's private ledger?" Dante asked, a grim smile touching his lips. "And your father's," Zora added. "I've just uploaded the evidence of a massive insurance fraud to the museum's internal guest network. To the museum's AI, it looks like a high-level heist is being coordinated right now by the men in the red masks. Suddenly, the museum's alarm didn't just chime, it shrieked. Security breach. Internal threat detected. Lockdown initiated. The museum's private security team, heavy-set men in tactical gear, rushed into the hall, but they weren't looking for Zora or Dante. They were looking for the intruders, whose biometric signatures Zora had just spoofed. The spotter in the red mask reached for a concealed weapon, but two security guards tackled him to the floor before he could draw. Now! The service tunnel behind the diamond! Zora pulled Dante toward the exhibit. They ducked. Behind the velvet curtains, just as the room erupted into chaos. In the cramped, dark hallway of the maintenance wing, the air was cold and smelled of floor wax. The neural tether began to vibrate, the warning sign that they were nearing the limits of the Faraday cage. "Zora, wait," Dante said, pulling her to a stop. He turned her to face him, his hands resting on her shoulders. The blue glow in his eyes was soft, pulsing rhythmically with her own heartbeat. "Why are you doing this? You could have taken that ledger and run. You could have bargained for your freedom with Isabella." Zora looked at the man who had once signed the papers to destroy her life. She saw the Ghost King stripped of his armor, vulnerable in a way no billionaire was allowed to be. Because Kai deserves a world where the people in charge don't just see code and currency. He deserves a father who is actually alive. Dante's gaze softened. He reached out, his thumb brushing her cheek. The touch didn't trigger his sensory overload. For the first time, the digital static was completely silent. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I was wrong about you 5 years ago, Zora. I was blind to everything but the grid." "Don't get sentimental yet, Mr. Shin," Zora whispered, though she didn't move away. "We're still trapped in a museum, and my son is sitting in a crate in a basement. We need to—" She was cut short by a cold, mechanical click. From the shadows of the maintenance tunnel emerged Isabella. She wasn't wearing her gala dress anymore. She was in a tactical suit, holding a high-frequency jammer. "You really are a genius, Zora," Isabella sneered. "A beautiful, arrogant genius. You thought you could frame us? You just gave me the perfect excuse to neutralize a pair of diamond thieves." Isabella flipped the switch on the jammer. The Faraday cage was still intact, but the jammer created a localized dead zone. The neural tether didn't just glitch, it snapped. Dante let out a silent scream, his body seizing as his nervous system collapsed into a feedback loop. He fell to the floor, his eyes rolling back. Zora felt the world go white. A pain sharper than any blade sliced through her mind. She fell to her knees, clutching her head, as her vision began to blur into static. "No more tether," Isabella whispered, standing over them as she raised a silenced pistol. "No more Ghost King, and soon, no more Source Key." The world didn't go black. It went white, a searing, electric void where Zora's thoughts used to be. The snap of the neural tether was like a piano wire breaking inside her skull. She collapsed onto the cold concrete of the maintenance tunnel, her fingers scraping the floor as she gasped for air that wouldn't come. Beside her, Dante was a fallen god, his body jerking in the throes of a grand mal seizure as his brain tried to process the sudden silence of the AI. Isabella stood over them, the silenced pistol in her hand looking like an extension of her own cold corporate soul. "You see, Zora, technology is a fragile thing. You thought you were his lifeline, but you were just his leash, and now I'm going to cut it for good." Zora's vision swirled. The static in her head was screaming, a high-pitched frequency that threatened to shatter her eardrums. But through the noise, she heard a sound that didn't belong in a museum basement. It was a rhythmic, metallic chirping, Kai's toy. The silver microchip in her son's robot wasn't just a key, it was a beacon. And because the tether had snapped, the AI's safety protocols had defaulted to the nearest compatible neural signature. The mother code inside Zora was calling out to the child code in Kai's toy. "Kai," Zora wheezed, her hand fumbling for the gold wire in her hair. "Don't bother," Isabella sneered, leveling the barrel at Zora's forehead. "The jammer is absolute. You're just a girl in a pretty dress dying in the dark." Isabella squeezed the trigger. Click! The gun didn't fire. The museum's emergency fire suppression system suddenly erupted, drenching the tunnel in freezing chemical foam. The lights didn't just flicker, they turned a deep blood red. From the speakers above, a voice that sounded like a distorted version of Zora's own voice boomed. "Bloodline protocol initiated. Unauthorized user detected. Purge sequence in 3, 2... "What?" Isabella screamed, shaking the pistol. "Aura, stop! I am the vice president. VP status revoked, the AI replied. Current administrator, Kai Vance Sato. The heavy blast door at the end of the tunnel slammed shut, separating Isabella from Zora and Dante. Isabella pounded on the reinforced steel, her screams muffled as the foam filled her side of the corridor. Zora didn't wait to see if the door would hold. She crawled to Dante, her hands trembling as she grabbed his face. He was still, his skin graying as his heart struggled to find a rhythm without the neural assist. Dante, look. At me! Dante! He didn't move. The digital static had finally claimed him. Zora knew there was only one way to save him. It was the forbidden patch, the one she had sworn she would never use. She had to use her own body as a bridge. She grabbed a stray fiber optic cable from a nearby junction box and stripped the casing with her teeth. She pressed one end to the interface port at the base of Dante's skull and the other to the gold wire in her hair. Execute, she whispered. The jolt was like being hit by a freight train. Zora's back arched as a massive surge of raw data poured through her. She wasn't just sending code, she was sending her own life force, her memories, her heartbeat. She saw flashes of her childhood, the night Kai was born, and the moment Dante had looked at her in the elevator. Dante's eyes snapped open. They weren't blue anymore. They were gold. He let out a long, shuddering breath, his hand flying up to catch Zora's wrist. The connection stabilized. The tether didn't just reboot, it evolved. The Faraday cage couldn't stop them anymore because they weren't broadcasting. They were becoming the broadcast. Zora, Dante's voice was different, deeper, resonant with the power of a fully sentient machine. I can see the whole grid. I can see where they're taking him. Taking who? Zora's heart plummeted. The red dragons, Dante rasped, his grip tightening. They didn't just come for the museum. That was the distraction. My father. He has Kai. He's taking him to the Sato vault. Zora felt a cold, sharp rage ignite in her chest. Hiroshi Sato hadn't come for the code. He had come for the only thing that could unlock the source key permanently, the blood of a Sato heir. They're at the heliport, Dante said, pulling Zora to her feet. He didn't look like the Ghost King anymore. He looked like a man who was ready to burn the city to the ground. If we don't get there in 5 minutes, they'll be over the ocean. Then we... Stop playing by their rules, Zora said, her eyes glowing with the same golden light as his. Aura, override all city transport. Give us a clear path to the sky. The rain over Neo Sol didn't fall. It shattered against the neon glass of the city's spires, fueled by a gale that smelled of ozone and jet fuel. On the rooftop of the Museum of Antiquities, Zora and Dante stood at the edge of the abyss. The neural tether between them was no longer a vibration. It was a visible arc of golden light, flickering in the downpour. Dante's hand was fused with Zora's, his palm acting as the conduit for the massive data stream they were pulling from the city's mainframe. I see the transport, Dante shouted over the roar of the wind. 300 meters away, a black, unmarked VTOL aircraft rose from a private helipad. Through the digital overlay in her eyes, Zora could see the heat signature of a child sitting in the back, her son, Kai, surrounded by 4 red dragon guards. He's all leaving the range of the city's local network, Zora gasped, her knees buckling as she felt the strain of the bloodline protocol on her heart. If he hits the stratosphere, the signal will break. We won't be able to track him. Then we don't track him. We catch him, Dante said. He looked at the transport, then at the heavy maintenance crane hanging over the edge of the museum roof. Aura, override the crane's safety limits. Set the counterweight to zero gravity mode. Dante, what are you doing? Zora's eyes widened as the massive steel arm of the crane began to swivel toward them. You said you wanted to stop playing by their rules, Dante replied, a grim, determined light in his golden eyes. We aren't going to follow them. We're going to intercept. He grabbed a high-tension carbon cable from the crane's winch and wrapped it around his arm, pulling Zora flush against his chest. The tether flared bright, a surge of adrenaline and code binding them so tightly she could feel the thrum of his thoughts. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a living weapon, his nervous system overclocked by the mother code Zora had gifted him. Hold on to me, he commanded. With a roar of grinding gears, the crane swung outward, acting like a giant slingshot. They were launched into the rainy void, a streak of midnight silk and golden light hurtling across the gap between the buildings. For a moment, Zora felt the weightlessness of a dream, a terrifying, beautiful silence, where the only sound was Dante's heartbeat echoing in her mind. They slammed onto the wing of the VTOL with a bone-jarring impact. The aircraft tilted sharply, its engines whining as the autopilot tried to compensate for the sudden weight. Zora scrambled for a handhold on the slick carbon fiber hull, her fingers slipping until Dante's hand clamped onto her waist, anchoring her. Inside the cabin, Hiroshi Sato, the man who had built an empire on the ruins of Zora's life, turned away from the window. He looked at the golden glow reflecting in the glass, his face a mask of cold, aristocratic fury. "So, the Ghost King has finally grown a spine," Hiroshi muttered. His voice piped through the external speakers. "And he's brought the thief with him. Let him go, Hiroshi." Dante's voice was amplified by the AI, booming like thunder against the hull. "The code is stable. You have what you wanted. Give me the boy." "The code is not stable, Dante," Hiroshi countered, gesturing to Kai, who was clutching his toy robot in the corner of the cabin. "It is evolving, and evolution requires a sacrifice. The boy's blood contains the only biological bridge to the source key. You aren't here to save him. You're here to witness the birth of a new god." Hiroshi signaled the red dragons. The side hatch of the VTOL hissed open, and two guards stepped out onto the wing, their magnetic boots locking them to the surface. They held high-frequency blades that crackled with blue electricity, the only weapons capable of severing a neural tether. Zora felt the mother code inside her react. It wasn't a logic gate anymore. It was an instinct. She reached into the gold wire of her hair and pulled out a small jagged shard of the silver chip she had hidden there for emergencies. "Dante, give me the frequency," Zora whispered, her eyes turning a solid, burning gold. "Zora, no, that will burn out your synapses," Dante warned, but he could feel her resolve through the link. "I lost 5 years to these people," Zora hissed, the rain turning to steam as her body temperature rose. "I am not losing my son." She slammed the shard into the wing of the aircraft. The forbidden patch didn't just override the transport, it devoured it. The VTOL's lights turned red, its engines sputtered, and the magnetic boots of the guards flickered out. One guard was swept off the wing into the dark abyss below. The second lunged for Zora, his blade descending toward the golden arc of the tether. Dante moved first. He didn't use a weapon, he used the static. He caught the guard's blade with his bare hand, the blue electricity arcing through his arm and into the tether. Instead of dying, Dante channeled the energy, a massive pulse of digital force throwing the guard backward. The VTOL began to spiral, a dying bird in a lightning storm. "Kai!" Zora screamed, lunging for the open hatch. She saw her son's face, terrified. Tear-streaked, as Hiroshi grabbed the boy's collar, pulling him toward the emergency escape pod. The world was tilted at a 45-degree angle, a chaotic centrifuge of screaming metal and warning sirens. The VTOL was a dying beast, plunging through the rain-slicked sky of Neo Sol toward the jagged skyline. Inside the cabin, gravity had become an enemy. Zora's boots skidded on the carbon fiber floor as she lunged toward the back of the aircraft. The neural tether between her and Dante was stretched to its absolute limit. A brilliant into the neural link. Dante, still anchored to the external hull by sheer willpower and a bleeding hand, sent a massive surge of digital static through the VTOL's internal wiring. The guard's blade didn't just short out, it exploded in a shower of blue sparks. The guard was thrown against the ceiling as the aircraft bucked. Zora used the moment of weightlessness to vault over a row of seats. She hit the floor sliding, her hand reaching out for Kai's. Her fingers brushed his, the same warmth, the same heartbeat she had protected for 5 years in the shadows. "Mommy!" Kai cried out, lunging toward her. But Hiroshi was faster. He shoved Kai into the pod and stepped in after him. "If I cannot have the god I built, I will have the blood that creates it," Hiroshi snarled. He initiated the launch sequence. "No!" Zora's fingers clawed at the closing seal of the pod. The tether screamed. The distance between her and Dante was now more than 12 feet. The synaptic failure warning didn't just flash in her eyes. It felt like a physical hammer striking her brain. Her vision fractured into 1,000 shards of digital glass. She felt Dante's agony as if it were her own, his heart slowing, his lungs seizing. "Zora, let go!" Dante's voice echoed in her mind, faint and drowning. "Save him! Save the boy! I'm not leaving either of you!" Zora roared. She didn't pull back. Instead, she pushed. She jammed her arm into the closing teeth of the escape pod door, using her own bone and muscle to stop the seal. The pain was blinding, but she used it. She channeled the agony of the breaking tether into a singular, focused command. She wasn't just a coder. She was the mother code. She synchronized her heartbeat with the pod's internal computer. Sync, sync, sync. Suddenly, the golden glow of the tether turned a deep, resonant crimson. The masquerade sync had begun. Zora wasn't just tied to Dante anymore. She was drawing the AI out of the VTOL and into herself, using her body as a bridge to pull Dante through the air and into the pod. The VTOL's main engine exploded. The tail section of the aircraft sheared off, sent spinning into the dark. Hiroshi's face contorted in terror as the pod began to vibrate with a frequency it wasn't designed to handle. Zora's arm was still pinned, her skin glowing with a terrifying, white-hot light. Dante, propelled by the sudden magnetic surge she had created, flew through the open hatch of the tail section. his hand locking onto the pod's exterior handle just as it launched. The pod shot away from the fireball of the VTOL, a silver bullet cutting through the rain. Inside, the gravity shifted violently. Hiroshi was thrown against the far wall, but Zora held onto the center console, her vision fading to black. She felt a heavy, warm weight slam against the glass of the pod door. It was Dante. He was outside, holding onto the hull in the freezing wind, his eyes locked onto hers through the reinforced pain. They were falling. The escape pod's parachutes had been shredded by the explosion. They were a 3-ton weight plummeting toward the Han River. "Mommy, I'm scared," Kai whispered, crawling into Zora's lap. Zora wrapped her arms around him, her eyes fixed on Dante. The tether was back, thicker, stronger, a bridge of fire between the woman inside and the man outside. "Don't be scared, Kai," Zora whispered, her voice a ghost of its former self. "We're finally going to be a family, even if it's only for a few more seconds." Chapter 9. The blackout. The impact wasn't a splash. It was a collision with a wall of concrete. The Han River surged upward, a cold, black hand that swallowed the escape pod whole. Inside, the world became a cacophony of groaning metal and the frantic hiss of pressurized air escaping. Zora's lungs felt like they had been filled with molten lead as the pod began its rapid descent into the murky depths. The red emergency lights flickered and died, leaving them in a terrifying, watery tomb. "Dante!" Zora's scream was a bubble of air lost in the dark. She scrambled toward the reinforced glass of the pod door. Outside, the water was a deep, impenetrable green. Dante was still there, his body pressed against the hull by the force of the sinking pod, but his eyes were closed. The golden glow of the neural tether was dimming, flickering like a dying candle in a gale. The blackout had arrived, not just in the city, but in their shared consciousness. "He's gone, Zora!" A voice rasped from the shadows of the pod. Zora spun around. Hiroshi Sato was pinned under a collapsed equipment rack, blood trailing from a gash on his forehead, but his eyes were wide with a manic, crystalline clarity. "The pressure at this depth will crush the tether. The data will cascade. He's already brain dead. Give me the boy, and I can use the pod's manual override to surface." "Shut up!" Zora hissed. She turned back to the door, her hands fumbling for the manual release. "Mommy, the water is coming in!" Kai cried. He was standing on the seat, pointing at a hairline fracture in the glass, where a thin, high-pressure jet of freezing river water was beginning to spray into the cabin. Zora felt the mother code inside her begin to panic. This was the moment of synaptic failure. With the tether nearly severed by the water's interference, her mind was drifting. She saw flashes of code, the original Aura blueprints, overlapping with the sight of her son's terrified face. She realized then that the tether wasn't just a connection between her and Dante. It was a bridge for the AI to find a host. If Dante died, the AI would jump to the next strongest link. "Kai, I won't let you have him," Zora whispered, her voice hardening. She didn't reach for the manual override. She reached for the gold wire in her hair. She ripped the wire free, ignoring the sharp sting of the scalp grafts being torn. She jammed the gold wire into the pod's communication array, her fingers moving with the precision of a machine. She wasn't trying to surface. She was trying to jumpstart a heart. "Dante, listen to my voice!" she screamed into the neural link, her mind projecting the sound through the external hull. "I am the source key. I am the one who built you. Wake up!" The pod groaned as it hit the riverbed, sinking into the soft silt. The water was now up to Zora's waist. Beside her, Hiroshi was laughing, a jagged, broken sound. "You're killing yourself for a ghost, Zora! Look at him!" Outside the glass, Dante's body began to drift away, his grip finally failing. But as he floated into the darkness, his eyes snapped open. They weren't gold, they weren't blue, they were a brilliant, blinding white. He didn't swim, he didn't move. He reached out a hand, and the water around him began to boil. The blackout was over. Dante wasn't just using the AI anymore. He was overriding the physics of the grid. Massive pulse of electromagnetic energy erupted from Dante's body. The river lit up for miles, a subterranean lightning strike that shorted out every bridge and skyscraper along the Han. The pod's door didn't just open. It was torn from its hinges by a telekinetic force. Dante surged inside, his hand catching Zora's before she could be swept out by the rushing water. He pulled her and Kai into his arms, his body radiating a heat that turned the freezing river water into steam. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice vibrating through the very marrow of her bones. But as they moved to exit the pod, Hiroshi's hand shot out, grabbing Zora's ankle with a strength born of pure desperation. "If I don't leave this river, nobody does." Hiroshi pulled a small black detonator from his pocket, the scuttle charge for the pod. The explosion didn't happen. As Hiroshi's thumb slammed down on the detonator, the device didn't spark. It dissolved. Under the crushing pressure of the Han River, the mother code had finally achieved total synchronization. Zora didn't just feel the technology, she commanded it. With a flick of her mind, she had disassembled the detonator's molecular structure before the signal could even reach the blasting cap. Dante didn't wait for a second attempt. He kicked off from the silt, his arm wrapped around Zora and Kai, a human torpedo fueled by a white-hot neural fire. They broke the surface of the water in a violent spray of foam and moonlight. Dante dragged them onto the rocky bank, collapsing onto the jagged stones as the blackout over Neo-Sol began to lift. One by one, the skyscrapers flickered back to life, their glass facades reflecting the gold and white light still humming between the three of them. Hiroshi's body drifted to the shore a moment later, exhausted and broken, his empire literally and figuratively washed away. But he wasn't looking at his ruined suit or his lost billions. He was staring at Kai. The boy stood between Zora and Dante, his toy robot now silent, but his own eyes were glowing with a soft, steady amber. The bridge was complete. The source key wasn't a chip or a line of code. It was the biological evolution of a child born from a mother of logic and a father of steel. "It's over, Hiroshi," Dante rasped, his voice finally returning to its human register. The white light in his eyes faded, leaving behind a deep, soulful brown. He looked at Zora, his hand reaching out to touch her face. This time there was no static, no pain, just the warmth of skin on skin. "The forbidden upload isn't forbidden anymore. It's just us. You think you can just live?" Hiroshi spat, coughing up river water. "The world will hunt that boy. They will want the power he carries." "Let them try," Zora said, standing tall. Her dress was shredded, her gold wire gone, but she had never looked more like a queen. She pulled a small holographic drive from her pocket, the one she had used to trap Isabella's secrets in the museum. "By sunrise, every news agency on the planet will have the records of your backdoor surveillance. Shin-Tech is dead, but the Aura AI, she's staying with us, as a protector, not a weapon." As the sirens of the city's emergency services grew louder in the distance, Zora knelt down beside Kai. She checked his pulse, his eyes, his heart. He was perfect. He was the future she had spent 5 years hiding in the dark to protect. Dante knelt beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. The neural tether was gone, but the connection remained, a phantom limb that made them move in perfect unison. He looked at the city he had once ruled with cold indifference, and then back at the woman who had rebooted his soul. "Where do we go?" Dante asked. "There's no penthouse anymore, no ghost king." Zora looked at the rising sun, the light hitting the water where their nightmare had ended. She took Dante's hand, her fingers interlacing with his. "We go back to the basement," Zora said with a small, defiant smile. "I have a lot of code to rewrite, and this time I'm not doing it alone." The mother code had found its home. The Untouchable CEO had found his touch, and in the heart of a digital slum, a new kind of legacy was just beginning to boot up. Zora and Dante walked through fire and water to prove that a family is worth more than any empire. If you believe that no hero should ever have to hide in the shadows again, hit the like button and subscribe so their story of defiance and love lives on forever in the grid.